Today we're visiting the graves of Ruth Ellis and David Blakely, and I'm in for a bit of a shock. More about that later in the video. Theirs was a tragic story of passion, jealousy and rage, leading to a violent end when on the evening of the 10th of April 1955, Easter Sunday, Ruth fatally shot David outside the Magdala pub in Hampstead, London. Arrested at the scene and charged with her lover's murder, Ruth made no attempt to deny or excuse her guilt. The court case at the Old Bailey lasted less than 2 days, and on the 21st of June 1955, Ruth Ellis was found guilty of the murder of David Blakely and sentenced to death. Ruth was executed in Holloway Prison at 9 a.m. on the 13th of July 1955. The case had caused a sensation. There was an outcry to abolish capital punishment. Although the death penalty was not abolished until 1965, Ruth Ellis was the last woman to be hanged in the UK. The story of Ruth Ellis did not end there. After Ruth was hanged, a post-mortem took place in the prison, and Ruth was buried in an unmarked grave within the prison grounds, with 4 other women who had also been executed at various different times. In the early 1970s, Holloway was undergoing building works, and the graves of Ruth and the other 4 women were in the way and needed to be removed. In March 1971, the prison governor of Holloway visited Ruth's sister Muriel and explained that Ruth would have to be exhumed and returned to Muriel for a private and secret burial elsewhere, insisting that neither Ruth's son Andre, any other family members or friends, or the press were to be informed. This was to be a top secret manoeuvre. Muriel would not accept this and insisted that Ruth's son be informed, which he was. Ruth would then be buried with her sister Betty in the family plot at Hemel Hempstead. Things would not go according to plan. When Andre was told Holloway was returning his mother's body, he took over the arrangements without telling Muriel, who would only find out via the press after the fact. Andre wanted Ruth buried with David at Holy Trinity Church, Penn. This naturally would not have been acceptable to David's family, and the church at Penn refused entry to Ruth. So Andre set about finding the closest cemetery to where David was that would accept Ruth, and that turned out to be St Mary's Church in Amersham, which is just less than 5 miles away from where David Blakely is buried. On the 1st of April 1971 at 5 a.m, Ruth's body was removed from Holloway Prison and transported to the churchyard at Amersham, where at midnight the vicar of St Mary's and her son Andre buried her in this beautiful quiet corner of the cemetery, where last year a new headstone was laid for Ruth. And the story gets even more fascinating. So, I've come here, I've arrived with flowers, and I had every intention of coming up to Ruth and putting flowers on her grave, as you do. And when I got here, someone's stolen her headstone. What? What is that all about? Someone's come here and stolen a headstone that was laid about a year ago by some really nice guy who footed the bill himself and laid a stone for her because her story moved him. And people have nicked it, they've stolen it or trashed it, or whatever they've done makes no sense to me. So I am going to tell you the story, we're going to get there, but I just need a moment to get this into my head that someone's actually done this. You can only imagine my shock when I discovered her new headstone was missing, but this isn't the first time, so I'll continue with the story. 6 months after Ruth's interment, Andre had a headstone placed on her grave which read, Ruth Hornby, 1926 to 1955. Although Ruth was christened Ruth Nielsen, her father's name when he was younger had been Hornby, but he'd changed it to Nielsen before Ruth's birth. In 1981, Andre made his last will and testament, requesting that after his death his body be buried with his mother in St Mary's, Amersham. Less than a year later, in 1982, Andre, in a deep depression, visited Ruth's grave and destroyed the headstone, smashing it into several pieces. Andre was finding life difficult to cope with and was eventually found dead on the 17th of June 1982 in his bedsit, which was located in a small attic room at the top of a boarding house. Sadly, he'd committed suicide and he'd been dead for around 2 weeks. Muriel, as Andre's next of kin, had his body cremated. She fulfilled his last request by burying his ashes in his mother's grave on the 28th of June 1982. I visited Ruth's grave in 2019 while I was writing my book which featured her story. When I arrived at the time, there was a pile of rubble which I assumed may have been her original headstone and a pretty carved wooden plaque in its place with her name on it. Then, in 2021, I heard that a kindly gentleman had organised a memorial stone for Ruth to be placed on her grave. You'll find a link to his YouTube in my description. I fully expected to come here and see the new stone, but sadly it was not to be. I'm not sure if it was removed by either the church or the council, although I cannot think of a good reason that would make them do so. I can only guess it's been removed for some other reason, which I'm unable to account for. Someone had been here before me, possibly for the recent anniversary, and left some beautiful dark pink carnations and a note, which unfortunately I was unable to read. I think it's time now to go and visit the grave of David Blakely, so I hope you'll come with me on that journey. So now we've come to visit the grave of David Blakely and bring some flowers. This is where her son Andre wanted Ruth buried. It cannot be overestimated what a devastating and traumatic tragedy the murder of David Blakely was for his family and friends. He now rests here in this pretty Buckinghamshire village churchyard with his elder brother who died in 1963 and their mother just behind her 2 sons. Anne passed away in 1975 and is buried with her husband, David's stepfather Humphrey, who died not long after his wife in 1978. They also share this part of the graveyard with David's childhood nanny, Beatrice Holman, whose ashes are buried next to the family plot. The insignia on David's headstone is that of the Highland Light Infantry with whom he did his national service. As we leave the church, just across the road is the Crown Pub, the scene of many furious rows. One New Year's Eve, David gave Ruth a black eye as they fought sitting in the car in the pub car park. Both were physically violent towards each other. Ruth was often seen with bruises, while it was also reported that Ruth's violent and jealous nature frightened David. Their relationship was described by one of their friends as unstable as a stick of dynamite. It was also non-exclusive. Both were seeing other people. David told a friend shortly before he died, "I'd do anything to get away from her, but as soon as we meet, it all starts again." If you've enjoyed today's video, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, give me a like and leave me a comment in the comment section. Thank you.